Hello, everybody, and welcome into our Week 1 edition of WCPO's Flying Pigskin Podcast, where we talk everything Bengals. I am Caleb Noe, joined today by Tanya O'Rourke. You see her face almost every day on WCPO, and Reggie Wilson, who had the highlights of last night's Bengals game for us on WCPO. So, really cool cat. I'm going to start out hot. Your feelings immediately after Bullock missed the goal in last night's loss.
My feeling immediately was that was the most Bengal way to lose a game that there ever was or will be, period.
I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. Reggie?
He did what? And then he hurt what? Yeah, right. That was my immediate reaction.
So, and I was going to, you're not buying the injury.
Okay, so in the post game, when they asked him, he said that he came up with his left calf. And then if you look at the video,
he didn't know which one to grab.
Calf.
He didn't know which one to grab, yes.
So which one was it, Randy? I think it was just him being embarrassed that he missed a kick that was such a chip shot.
I mean, that was embarrassing. I mean, it just really was one of those like, no, he didn't just miss that chip shot. He did not just miss that. But Caleb, you're the kicker.
It took me like 10 or 15 minutes to really convince myself that what I just saw was real, that he actually missed the field goal, a 31-yarder. It took me a while to convince myself that was real. But from a kicker's perspective, first of all, I can tell you, and I tweeted about this a little bit last night, the first thing I will say is that I do have sympathy for kickers. I understand that. That's a really, kicking is difficult. It's, there's an art to it, and that's a very difficult spot to be in, to be down 3 and have to kick to tie it up, even if it is a 31-yard field goal. But I agree with Reggie. One of my thoughts, I watched that back a bunch of times last night. One of my thoughts was he didn't know which calf to grab at first. That was my first thought. My next thought was again, I have sympathy for kickers. So it's like, I hate to be this guy, but in 10 plus years of kicking every single day, that is one thing. I'm not saying it could never happen, but that's one thing I never experienced was a calf grabbing up right as I kicked the ball.
He needs some Gatorade or something.
Yeah.
Eat some nanas.
All right, so we all wondered going into the game how Joe Burrow would look. I think we all, kind of assumed maybe he's going to make some mistakes. He's a rookie. Let's be real here. But overall takeaways after watching the game, your thoughts on Joe Burrow, Tanya?
Okay, obviously the first half was not brilliant from an offensive line standpoint, didn't give him a lot of time in the pocket. I love that he got to run in his first touchdown. I really do. I think that's a nice way to start your NFL career. But I'm going to tell you that after watching that entire game and seeing that 2-minute drive at the end of the game, there was not a crowd there, but I don't think it matters when you're a professional. Your head's in it anyway.
It shouldn't, right? I mean, ideally it should not matter. But.
And so to see him field general that 2-minute drive in spectacular fashion, I mean, he looked like a veteran to me out there, a guy who'd been around, and he kept everyone calm, and he was making sure when they were, I looked at that and I thought, this dude is going to be phenomenal.
Now, Reggie, you might be at an unfair advantage here because you've already gotten to hear from like the experts, if you will, last night on sports of all sorts and everything. But I want to hear your take. I mean, by all means, mix in what you've heard from the other guys.
So Tanya was spot on with this. And I think this is the reason why his experience at Ohio State and LSU, like Tanya said, I don't think it really mattered if there was a crowd there or not. He played in Death Valley on a Saturday night primetime. Like it's hard to say it gets much bigger than that. He's played in Ohio Stadium. Like, these are some of the biggest venues in sports. 100,000 plus people are seated in this place. And it wouldn't have mattered if Paul Brown Stadium was full of people yesterday. I liked what I saw. He showed enough to me for me to say, okay, this guy's going to be the real deal. And what I was most impressed by, and I tweeted about it a little bit, Caleb, and you saw it last night, was, man, he stepped in and was just a pro. Like, he hadn't had any preseason snaps. he had only been facing his own defense from his own team, and he went in there and was poised and looked just as much of a real deal as he did in college. There were some mistakes. I'm not gonna, negate those. That little shovel pass that he did.
Yeah, the shovel pass was not a good play on his part.
Yeah.
But I think
you can't do
like,
that. And
if
the
you would have
offensive line, man, he had guys running free at him all day, and he was just staring at the barrel of the gun, if you will, and just like firing darts.
He never looked afraid, did he?
No,
Rich?
he never did, and he got up after each lick. That was one play where there was an option, and he gave it to Joe at the very last minute, and he got blown up. And I was on Twitter, and it was just like everyone was tweeting from the press box that it was just like an audible gasp when he got hit. And he just popped back up like, all right, ready to go to the next play. I just think he's the real
in your early 20s is all I have to say about that. But don't you think, like, for me, I was watching him, and when they went in at halftime, and, under Marvin Lewis, the halftime adjustments were always not good, or you couldn't tell that they made a halftime adjustment. It is my opinion, and I know this is just whack, but that he went in there at halftime and looked at his line and said, "Are you kidding me?" And they made adjustments.
Already,
that worked.
Tanya, he's doing that?
I think so. I do. And I mean, please find out if I'm wrong. You're in those locker rooms, guys, or no, you're not. You're talking to these guys. I want to know who said to the line, "Don't you dare let me, or don't you dare let him be on his butt one more time." Because to me, it felt like there was adjustments made, but someone had to say, "Not going to happen again, guys. Don't let it happen again." And they made great adjustments at halftime, which for Bengals is not normal.
I think it was Keenan that tweeted it last night. He said, did you see that, Reggie?
Yeah, he's like, "Don't David Carr this kid."
Well, he tweeted it. He tweeted at another point, was like, he talked about how Joe Burrow had promised to buy lavish gifts for the offensive linemen. He was like, those lavish gifts are looking like lumps of coal at this point. He was not protected very well, especially in the first half. I look back at his stats from last year at LSU. The most he was sacked in one game at LSU last year was 5 times. He was sacked an average of 2.2 times per game last year at LSU. He was sacked 3 times in the first half alone last night. And I'd like to go in and look at the next gen stuff about how many times he was knocked down, how many times he was pressured, how many times he was touched last night or hit, made contact with. I think that would be an interesting study too, if you dove deeply into that. But looking at his final drive, which is what everybody's been talking about, as this thing is unfolding, I'm thinking this looks like a seasoned veteran. This takes me back to, I in no way am I comparing him to either of these guys, but these guys, I saw growing up, I saw dozens and dozens of times where Tom Brady or Peyton Manning drove a team down the field and led them to a game-tying or game-winning field goal or touchdown. And it just felt like that. It really, the pace of his stats as he drove the team down the field and his demeanor, it felt like that. Again, I am not drawing comparisons to those players. He's played one game in the NFL, but it did feel like that. Now, when I was talking to my dad,
that's exactly what I thought too, though. And I don't want to set that bar for him right now. I mean, I think that's a dangerous thing to do, but it's exactly what I thought. I was like, wow, that felt Peyton Manning-esque. Young Peyton, young Tom Brady, that ability to drive down the field without really a whole lot of care. Like, this is what we're doing. I'm in charge. It's like someone gave him the con and he was in charge and he liked it. And I liked that.
It looked like a totally different Bengals offense on that drive. Now, when I was talking to my dad on the phone last night about it, I said it looked like one of those vintage drives from one of these seasoned veterans. And I was like, the thing about it is, I don't know if I ever saw Tom Brady lead a 2-minute drive and then have a missed field goal. I'm sure it happened at some point, but Adam Vinatieri doesn't miss that kick. And then, Peyton Manning in his early career with Mike Vanderjagt. And, those are guys that don't miss those kicks. And that's not a shot against Randy Bullock, because he's been good. And he had hit from 43 and 50 yesterday prior to that. So,
but the look on the look that they caught Joe Burrow's face afterwards. That disbelief.
Wasn't that all of Cincinnati at that very moment?
Yeah, except that, as a lifelong Cincinnatian, it was sort of like, oh, I believe that. I believe that. Because like you said, if it's the Patriots, if it's, the Colts, or later on the, Denver, someone's going to finish that game with him. He can't carry this team by himself. He's certainly not carrying it by himself. I mean, Mixon looked good.
Point. And this was Keenan's point in his story last night, his post-game coverage. What are your all's thoughts on bringing the kicker out in that moment? There were 7 seconds on the clock. Do you give Joe Burrow one more chance to have his moment and throw a game-winning touchdown? Now, Zach Taylor's point post-game was, we don't want to take a chance of having a sack, because if he gets sacked, the game's over. And the O-line
I agreed with the call. As much as I didn't want to as a fan, I was like, no, just go for it. I thought it was the right call because it's a chip shot. And then you get your chance in overtime, and you don't hang it on an interception or an incomplete. And his first game is like, oh, he sucks. He can't finish the game. He did his job. And I think, this should be an easy make. And the fact that they gave up, the defense was pretty good overall, but they did let, obviously they let the lead slip. And so, but he's doing his job. And I just felt that they did a thorough, that is. And I think that I thought it was the right call. I disagreed with Keenan. I watched that last night. I totally disagreed with Keenan. I thought he was pretty tough when he didn't need to be, because I think that's smart football. It's logical football.
Reggie, do you trot the kicker out there?
Okay, so I'm of the school of thought where I take a gamble there. So there were 7 seconds left. I think that there was enough time for him to take another shot at the end zone. They were getting the ball out of his hands really quick on that drive. So maybe take a little shot for a back shoulder fade for AJ again, or something like that, and maybe not 5 or so seconds off the clock, and then maybe you kick it. But I thought there was enough time that they could try for the end zone one more time. And
there's definitely enough time, yeah.
Sack, but I think that there was enough time for him to do that.
It's a risk reward, and I see both sides of it. Where it's like, Joe Burrow he was in the zone. He had looked incredible, like we just mentioned on that final drive. Maybe give him one more shot at the end zone. But I also understand Zach Taylor's thinking there is that he took the safe option, which is kick a 31-yard field goal that should be an easy make. Let's take this thing to overtime.
Bengals, and
I do want to see Zach be a little bit more aggressive, though, just in general, not just like on that drive per se, but like some of the urgency and some of the play calls that Joe had. And I asked the guys last night on Sports of All Sorts, like, they had Joe looking really good in that hurry up, in that no huddle, running that 2 minute. You're like, speed it up on some drives. Do that, don't just, have them drop back 5-7 step drops and, Bosa's coming after them, eating them alive. Like, hurry it up. Get the defense off of them a little bit and let them get in the rhythm earlier than that, because we saw that he pretty much thrived in that 2 minute drill style.
So if you want to talk about being aggressive, there was 1 point in the game, one drive specifically in the third quarter, where the Bengals decided, let's air this thing out deep and try to separate a little bit on the scoreboard. And you know what I'm talking about, where they threw the 2 deep passes. One was to John Ross. The next one was to AJ Green. I want to hear your all's thoughts. The second one was a clear overthrow to AJ Green. The first one was, I don't know. That's what I want to ask you guys. Was it an overthrow, or was it a bad effort on Ross's part? I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I think it was a little bit of both. I think the first throw to Ross, it was just a hair in front of him. But I also think John Ross just kind of like short-armed it. And he, maybe he could have dove or something. I don't know. Like, he could have given a little bit more of an effort.
What would Reggie Wilson have done in that situation?
I would have lunged at it. I would have
laid that body out.
Yeah, just like lay out, man. Like, you're in a contract year. Like, make a play. Like, he put it there. The other one on AJ, though, I was just like, dang, like that would have been.
He was open.
man, like that would have been great if he would have hit that. But I think that was just a case where they just need to get a little bit more chemistry.
I just think I've watched John Ross play and not play. And I'm a little more critical of him. I just think that so far he's been a hell of a letdown. And it's unfortunate because I think he has so much great promise, but every time it's like he takes one step forward and four back. I wanted to, maybe he's afraid to be injured, but
I thought that too, maybe.
Yeah. But this is your team and you're supposed to be fighting for it. And I'm not, that's so easy for me to sit here and say, I've never been in a situation like that, but I was disappointed in his effort, in what seemed like his effort anyway. I was kind of like, come on, you could have got that. I really think that was catchable.
Remember how good he played last year in week 1 against the Seahawks? He had like a career day. It was like, where's that John Ross?
Well, and I remember the rest of the season us going, well, where the hell is Ross? John Ross is just like, he's one of those guys. He shows these great, beautiful moments, and then they're just so few and far between. And it's just, again, I thought he was a questionable draft choice to begin with, and because of his injuries. But, I've always had hope for him. But yesterday I found myself again going, well, there it is. I don't know.
Because of that play, because of that one drop?
Yeah. I mean, look, no one's going to play a perfect game, I don't think. But this is a piling up thing for me. I want to see John Ross do well, obviously. I would love to see him, really have his breakout year, especially in a contract year. He should have that. This should be something that, someone's in his ear going, dude, you gotta reach for that ball. You gotta get that. I don't know. I mean, I would love to hear his thoughts on it. And I did not hear it. I don't know if anyone spoke to him, but if I missed that, but I guess I've just seen a couple years of John Ross not being what he was billed to be. And I'm just a little disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed.
T. Higgins catches that.
T. Higgins catches that.
T. Higgins probably does catch that.
Yeah. So you got to wonder if you'll start seeing more and more of T. Higgins out there.
We didn't see much of him yesterday.
We didn't, which was interesting. We may see more of him moving forward. He missed some of training camp. He was out. He was, he missed some practices. So, maybe he's still figuring out the offense in some ways and figuring out pro football. But I think T. Higgins could be an impact player for the Bengals, maybe even in the next few weeks. We'll see. I
think it'll be interesting to see, I know in the Marvin Lewis era, you could tell who he liked and he didn't like by who he played. You really knew. You knew that guy was on his what list because he was sitting on his butt. And so I don't know much about how this, we had a really crappy season last year. It's hard to tell how this coach is, reacts. So I think it'll be interesting going forward to see how everyone starts shaking out, especially in that receiving core.
Who are Zach's guys?
Still figuring it out, and he got his draft class in here this year. And I think they had an interesting, obviously you get Joe Burrow, you fill out the linebacking core some in that draft, you get a star receiver like T. Higgins or a guy that could be a star. My thought on the John Ross drop, for what it's worth real quick, was that I thought it was not, because I saw a lot of people last night on Twitter saying, some people were like, oh, that's John Ross's fault. Oh, that's Joe Burrow's fault. I thought it was not a perfect pass, but I thought it was a touchdown pass. At the end of the day, and I think if you talk to most quarterbacks who have been very successful in the National Football League, I think they would tell you that not all of their touchdown passes were perfect passes. I think obviously you want to have perfect passes if you can. You want to throw it where the defense can't get it and your guy can. That's the goal. And he did that on that play. He threw it where only John Ross could make that catch. And John Ross didn't make that.
But that's called a playmaker, right? That's someone who can take the opportunity to turn a not perfect pass into a perfect opportunity. And he wasn't a playmaker on it. He just wasn't. I guess that's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You got to have a playmaker there. And again, I don't think that every pass has to be perfect, but I think they all have to be in a place where the receiver can make a play and the defense cannot get it. That's at the very core. That's what it's got to be. All right, watching a game with no fans in the stadium. We've gotten accustomed to it with the Reds. Football's a whole different game. than baseball is. I think that sometimes, and I mean, I'm not trying to separate the two. I think they both have their elements where the fans can become a factor. But, in a football game, football can be such an emotional and, hard-hitting game, and where you feed off of the energy of the crowd with everything, and there's no crowd there. What was it like watching it? Could you tell the difference watching it? Because there was fake crowd noise used.
Want me to go first? So from a fan's perspective, I think that the typical Bengal fan would say, not much different from last season, because there wasn't a lot of fans in the stadium last season, especially towards the end of the season. But, I think that in football, unlike in baseball, the fans really can affect a game. They can make it loud, they can make it quiet. And I kind of missed, like, especially in that last drive, I was like, I wanted to see people screaming and banging the sides of the wall or whatever, getting excited. And I, up until that point, I hadn't really missed it, but it was kind of at those moments when you're just on pins and needles sitting at home watching this, that I was like, I wanted someone to share that with me, that I could visually see. I missed it a little.
I love that. I think, so I kind of feel a couple different ways about this. So watching the game, there were times where I had to remind myself that, like, oh yeah, there are no fans there.
Right.
Because the crowd noise was such that it was just like, and it went with like the ebb and flows of the play calls and, the game. And then on the other hand, I'm starting to find some of this fake crowd noise a little obnoxious, because I feel like they're like just upping the decibels of the sound. And it's just like, okay, guys, we get it. Like, you guys want to simulate the sound, but it's like, yo, nobody is there. So can you kind of just crank it down a little bit? I also think it's kind of cool to hear what the players are saying when they're out on the field. And I feel like the fake crowd noise kind of takes away from that. Maybe it helps with like the expletives or whatever, because like when Tom Brady scored his first touchdown yesterday, he was letting them fly. And so the fake crowd noise probably helped with that. But it didn't bother me to have the noise on one hand, but then it did bother me once I did realize that there was no crowd. It was just like, okay, turn it down a little bit.
Does anyone know, like, and Caleb, I know you're going to answer this question, the question you posed, but on top of that, like at the Reds games, we know that there's a guy in charge at the Red Stadium doing it. Is it someone at Paul Brown Stadium or whatever stadium they're playing, or is it someone working for CBS Sports that's doing it? So
what I've heard is that there were reports that they've taken sound, like much like baseball took sound from MLB The Show, the baseball video game. NFL has taken sound from past years from NFL films recordings, and they've been using that. Now, as far as an individual guy working the sound at Paul Brown Stadium, I haven't met that guy. I'm sure they probably do have a guy working it, and it sounded pretty natural. It sounded pretty natural yesterday. To Reggie's point, it's like sometimes you kind of forget that there are no fans. The biggest thing for me is I'm kind of on the same wavelength as Reggie there, where I forget there are no fans there. And then I see an empty shot of the stadium and I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's what I mean. Like most of the game, I wasn't thinking about it much. But then at the end where you expect that cutaway of like the number one fan or something, right, and you don't get that. And you're sort of like, oh yeah. Well, because I personally love watching football in person, but I also really love it sitting there on my couch. So, I think football is one of those sports that translates so well to TV that it's not hard to watch it at home. But again,
there's so much emotion and passion that comes with football, just the game that it is, and that shows through the fans. And to just to see every fan shot this year just be cardboard cutouts.
Yeah,
it's like, and with people just kind of like, smiling for the camera. It's just a very different feel. All right, I want to look ahead a little bit. Obviously, next up is the in-state rivalry with the Browns. The Browns lost badly yesterday, and they did not look good yesterday against the Ravens. They lost 38-6 to Lamar and the Ravens. So So that automatically means the Bengals are going to win Thursday, right? Right? Anybody? Or Thursday, rather?
Okay, I know this is pie in the sky, but I think that they can beat the Browns. I think the Bengals looked better, especially in the second half, minus a crappy kick. I think the Bengals look better than the Browns. And I mean, I know we're going to Cleveland, right? It's away. So I don't know that matters.
It's a Thursday
with no
night
fans.
game. It's a short turnaround.
There's a short turnaround for both of them, though. There's no dog pound. There's no, I think this is a winnable game for sure for the Bengals. I do. And I think it'd be great to get that first game against the Browns as a W for the Bengals. I don't know. I'd like to see how they respond to that bad kick. And but meanwhile, I don't like the idea of going into Cleveland with the team that just got walloped, that has something to prove against, they want to make sure that this upstart has no ability to start.
Walloped in a divisional game against the Ravens. But I mean, I would caution Bengals fans too. The Ravens are really good. Like the Ravens are, arguably, you could argue the best team in football. It'd be hard to argue that the Chiefs are not right now, but the Ravens are easily teams in football probably right now. And the Browns have not been great recently. So, I think you look over that game and you cannot, as a Bengals fan, I was obviously being a little sarcastic a minute ago. I think it would be naive as a Bengals fan to be like, well, we lost by 3 and we could have tied it up and gone to overtime. The Browns got beat by 32, so we're obviously going to win. This game is not going to be a walk in the park. It's an away game, Burrow's first away game as an NFL quarterback. Reggie, your thoughts on that matchup this coming Thursday?
The fact that it's an away game doesn't bother me as much in a season like this, as opposed to the fact that it's a short turnaround. So it's like, okay, we got to get the game plan in and get it together really quickly. That I think will be a little tough for a rookie quarterback, but I'm pretty confident that he'll be able to handle it and that the Bengals will be up for the challenge. Obviously, I don't think the Browns will stink it up as bad as they did on Sunday because, they have a lot of talent on that team and they actually match up pretty well with the Bengals. I'm expecting, it to be, for lack of a better word, a dog fight.
Oh,
a dog fight at the dog pound with no dog pound.
Exactly.
I think this is more of a challenge for the coaching staff. I want to see how the coaching staff really responds on this one because, as you said, the short turnaround. I think maybe I'm giving Joe Burrow far too much credit here, but I think he's a guy that grasps football quickly. He does. He has really good IQ on it, and it's going to be up to the coaching staff to make sure that everyone's ready for this. And I'd like to see Zach Taylor and company really, come through on this one because, it was difficult to judge Zach Taylor last year. Really difficult. He was handed such a turd to work with all year. And this is a much improved team on paper anyway. And so I just want to see how they respond. I mean, I really do. I think that this is this is more of a coaching challenge than it is a player's challenge from the Bengals perspective.
I will say this too, Caleb. How about Jonah Williams? First 2 matchups, you get Joey Bosa and then Myles Garrett. Like, dude, welcome to the NFL.
Yeah, welcome to the league.
He had a rough time yesterday, and I know that Bosa ended up switching it up and coming at Bobby Hart quite a bit yesterday. He was talking some smack to Bobby Hart yesterday too. But I think Jonah Williams that's a very tough first couple games to have to go against Bosa and then Myles Garrett.
Buried as Wheaties.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, welcome to the league. What do you say? I mean, give us your best, if you're Jonah Williams, it's like, give me your best shot right off the top. We'll see what we can do.
That's what he was drafted to do is to protect Joe against big, scary guys like that.
Yeah. And, coming from the SEC, it's not anything that, he's seen some of the best D linemen. Myles Garrett being one of those. He came from the SEC too. So, he's seen some of the best. He was obviously matched up with some of the best in college too. So we'll see what happens. For me, I said that it took me 10 or 15 minutes to really convince myself that what I just saw last night was real. Once I convinced myself that it was real, that field goal was actually missed, that the offensive pass interference was actually called, and that's something we haven't even talked about. We need to talk about that. But once I convinced myself that all happened, it was so hard for me to look at the 0-1 on the Bengals record, because that one seems so big, because it seems like they should be 1-0. And I hate talking about moral victories. I hate that word. I hate that phrase. I hate everything about it, because in the National Football League, there is, in my opinion, no such thing. Do you all see Sunday as a moral victory? I hate that question. Is there any level of moral victory in that? No.
They got better from last year, I think. You know, the defense played better. You know, they got the new quarterback established in there. Mixon fumbled for the first time since his rookie year. Like, that was crazy to see. But if you don't win, there's no victory. There's the same thing I was asking Laurel Failer yesterday about FC Cincinnati. They didn't win, but they did score a goal for the first time in 5,000 years. So was that, you know, a good thing? She called it backward progress. So I can't say this is a victory of any sort.
Tanya?
I think it's nice to see that the team isn't as well. At least in this first game. We almost have to think of this as like for the coaches or the referees, the officiating staff, for everyone. This was preseason, what we normally think of as preseason. A lot of bugs to work out. You don't really know what you've got. You haven't played hard yet. And so it was nice to see that, for sure, this is an improved team. In my opinion, this is a much improved team from last year. We had a clean slate, but that clean slate, they needed that win. And I don't think there's a moral victory here. I think it's just nice to know that we're not hideous yet.
All right, we saved the best for last here. Offensive pass interference or no offensive pass interference on A.J. Green last night late in the game. Bengals' last offensive play other than the field goal. Offensive pass interference or not, Tanya?
It was so hard to watch that kick and end that game that way that it was almost like you forgot about the offensive pass interference for a while. Gosh, I think it probably was. I hate that so much, because I'd like to be like, that was bullcrap. But no, I think he pushed off a little bit. But, I was watching later on the Dallas game, and there were just some crud calls out there. And I'm thinking, it wasn't just our game. There were some questionable calls in that game for sure. And there was some offensive pass interference stuff called in the Dallas game that I thought wasn't. And it was just arms mixing up. And that's just, I don't necessarily think of that as a penalty. But, yeah, I guess I think you call that almost every time.
I like the tweet from Reggie last night where he said, shout out to I don't know exactly, I'm not quoting his tweet. He said something like, shout out to these NFL players for getting back on the field and playing the way they have with no preseason work whatsoever. And then he was like, but maybe the officials needed the extra reps.
Yeah.
They did.
But you didn't think it was? You didn't think it was a penalty?
So here's my thought. So with how they were calling it all game, Mike Williams was pushing off on the DBs quite a bit. And they were calling it on the DBs. And I'm like, yo, AJ Green is a much bigger name than Mike Williams. Like, you don't give him the benefit of the doubt. Like yesterday, Tanya mentioned the Dallas game. Jalen Ramsey, arguably the best cornerback in football. So when he cries foul, like, hey, that's pass interference on the offense, they called the flag.
That was theatrics, total theatrics.
They call the flag because it's like, well, if Jalen's saying that, he's really good, it must be a flag. And then you look back at it and you're like, nah, that was not pass interference. And I think by measure of the rule, the A.J. Green push-off was technically pass interference, but
But you're saying there has to be some consistency.
Yeah, like you all have been inconsistent on that call all day, so just let it ride. You robbed Joe Burrow of his moment.
Yep.
That was a beautiful drive that he orchestrated and topped it off with Burrow to Green. Like they were already getting ready to build him a statue outside of the stadium after that drive.
He was being canonized right after that game.
He couldn't even believe it. He was like, no way you call that. And they did. They robbed Joe of his signature moment early on.
Can we just give some props to the fact that AJ Green looked as beautiful on that catch with his little tippy toes inside? I was like, oh, thank God he's back. Thank you.
And they went to him when the game was on the line and when the game mattered, which said a whole lot too. I think that, we've got confidence in not only is this guy back, but he's our guy. Like when the game's on the line, we're going to this guy. And it's interesting you brought up Joe Burrow's reaction to that offensive pass interference call, because I thought that the 2 ISOs on Joe Burrow last night were so perfect, so perfectly timed. Hats off to the broadcast crew for catching those 2 reactions. But his reaction to the offensive pass interference call, where he turned to the sideline and just like put his hands over his face mask and just total disbelief. And then his other reaction to the missed field goal, where I couldn't even replicate his reaction face if I tried, but it was just so perfect. I think it was how everybody felt. But to Tanya's point, it was like, man, that was the most Cincinnati sports way to possibly get.
Yep.
All right, predictions.
Well, at least no. Joe Burrow did not break his leg yesterday.
Okay.
There's positive.
Don't even want to talk about that. But that is positive. Predictions for the Browns game on Thursday. Bengals-Browns, Thursday Night Football in Cleveland.
I think what Reggie said is right. I think it's a dogfight, but I think that it's I think the Bengals have an opportunity here. I really do. And I know that's me being some crazy, stupid Bengals fan who thinks, more of her team than she should. But overall, I was so happy to see a team that was competitive and finished a game. Well, finished the kick, but that they were finishing. They were in it. They were on it. They were playing hard, and they had someone behind center who was making sure that they were going to go down that field. I felt so positive outside of the way it ended that I was like, you know what? We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And so I think if they can build on that, if the coaching staff is on top of it, and have been doing their research and are ready to game plan this sucker, I think the Bengals could surprise everyone and come out of there eking out a win. That's my prediction.
Reggie Wilson, you're up.
I am confident after what I saw yesterday from the Bengals and the Browns to say that the Bengals can get their first win on Thursday. Are we doing score predictions, or are we just saying who's going to win?
Let's hear it.
Tanya, what's your score prediction?
I mean, I don't think it's – oh, gosh. I hate doing score predictions, but
let's go with this real quick. I'll stop you right there. The Bengals – this is kind of shocking. It's kind of shocking, really. The Bengals opened – talking Vegas here – opened as an 8.5-point underdog.
Dang.
To the Browns?
8.5-point underdog, which is actually pretty shocking.
I'll take that bet. I'll just take that bet. I don't know. I was going to say something like 17-14. I don't think it's – but I don't even know that they score that much. I don't know. I'm looking
at all of the lines here, and that's the second largest gap.
Wow.
Of a line in the league this week.
I'm a nutty fan then. Why do I think that we're better than we are?
No, you're not the only one, because that's what they opened. They opened as an 8.5-point underdog, and they're already down. The line is already down to 6 flat. So in other words, bettors think that that's a crazy line too. It's already down from 8.5 to 6.
I'll go.
A lot of bettors like the Bengals, at least against the spread.
I'll go Bengals 28, Browns 20.
Oh, I'm surprised, Reggie.
Yeah, Tanya? I'll do that.
What was your bet, Tanya?
I said 17-14. Bengals.
17-14 Bengals. All
No,
right.
I'm not putting any field goals on it. I'm just not doing that with Randy. This week, 28-20.
Well, I
Let
mean,
the Browns kick the field goals.
Someone better get some calming tapes into his head this next few days and just make sure that he's got his head on straight.
Or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly. That's a good point. Just like the emotional side of it, that, you know, he's not a very popular guy in Cincinnati right now. But again, he did hit from 50 and 43 earlier in the game. So it's like and there was a lot of stuff on Twitter and social media at that point that was like, oh, Randy Bullock, like, he's the man, like, he's carrying us right now. And then it was like, then it just didn't end well for him.
What have you done for me lately?
He's not a bad kicker, but like he does bonehead things like that from time to time where it's just like, oh my gosh. But he's not like, he hasn't done anything where we should say like, cut him today, cut him before the game is even over with, any rash decisions like that. Like, he's a good kicker. He messed up yesterday.
All right.
What about you, Caleb? What do you think?
Give me the Bengals 24-20.
Why? What?
Yeah,
we all think
So
the
we
Bengals
both think
win?
that the Browns will score 20, Caleb.
Yeah, you did say 20, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Bengals find the end zone more this week. I think they are able to find the end zone more this week. I think that to Reggie's point from earlier in the podcast, I think that they were a little conservative yesterday, especially in the first half. And I get it. You got a rookie quarterback. You want him to feel his way into the league slowly. He's got no preseason under his belt whatsoever. His first couple plays, his first pass was a little flip out to mix. Then they tried to run mix. They ran mixing quite a bit last night. So I think they tried to ease him into the league a little bit. I think maybe they find the end zone a couple more times next week. I mean, you're talking about a Browns team that gave up 38 points yesterday.
I think that you can't look at that 2-minute drill at the end and think, okay, we know what we got here now, a whole lot better, and we know he can handle it.
Yeah. Looking forward to it, guys. And thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast, The Flying Pigskin. Here, we will be here to wrap up every game this season. This is just the week 1 edition. We'll have 15 more editions of this, and maybe a few more. I'm not gonna say the P word, the playoffs word, but maybe we'll have a few more.
You just did.
We're gonna at least hope for it for now. Thank you all for listening. It's a short week for us too. We'll be back on Friday to break down that Bengals-Browns game on Thursday Night Football. Looking forward to that. Thank you, Tanya, for joining us. Thank you, Reggie, for joining us. And thank all of you for listening. You can get these podcasts. Please subscribe. You can get them anywhere where you listen to your podcast. Hoo day.